Hello, and welcome to the first live stream. I'm Mark Schultz, and welcome to Building Experiences with me. It's going to be a great show. I wanted to start the very first show and just talk a little bit about who I am, what the stream is, and what we hope to get out of the, taking your time to view this. So, who am I? I'm Mark Schultz. I'm a Principal Product Manager at Adobe. I work out of Sydney, Australia. Normally on planes, but of course we're in this environment where, like you, I'm grounded. It's not a bad thing, which leads me to why I'm put this show together. I love going out and talking with you. What I like most of all is hearing all the stories and the great things that are happening around the community. So it's a bit of give and take normally. I share some things that Adobe's working on. We hear some things back, and I love to share that around not just Australia, not just Asia Pacific, but around the globe. And because I didn't get a chance to meet up with a lot of you at Adobe Summit this year, I thought let's start an online community where we can start to collaborate. So while this is very much a show that I'm putting together, I'm hoping to bring as many people on to actually provide commentary as we go through. And we've got some great guests today, which I'll get to in a moment. The whole idea of the show is to focus on customer experience and the tools and technology behind it. I'll focus, of course, on the Adobe Experience Cloud because I work for Adobe, and we'll spend some time going in and out of different technologies. My passion, my background is around Adobe Experience Manager, so of course I'll be anchoring a lot of the content around that. But from time to time, I'll bring in people with other technology and other backgrounds to complement that. So I'm hoping that you'll get a lot of value. Now, the key thing is that this is a live session. So it's the very first one. We're trialing this to see how it works. I'll go through a number of topics, but your feedback is really important. Whether you're watching it live and you want to give us a thumbs up or, just add a comment on some things that we could cover, that's completely welcome. And if you're watching the recording, then feel free to comment and we'll have a look at that and incorporate the feedback from you all. So what are we going to see today? Well, we've got some great focus. This is the live stream getting started. And I thought, well, let's get started with AEM as well. And so much has changed that I thought, let's spend some time to look at some of the modern ways that we can actually use the tools that we live and love in potentially new ways. So to help me with that, I'm going to bring on some live guests and let's bring them onto the show. Gentlemen, how are you?
Very good, Mark. How are you?
Look, I'm excited and welcome. So Danny and Zoran are two people that I highly respect and have been around with the Adobe Technology and Experience Manager for some time. Rather than me screw up your job titles and what your background are, Danny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing, Mark. So I'm Danny Gordon. I'm based in the United States, in Southern California, and my job title these days is Technical Marketing Engineer. But I've been working with Adobe Experience Manager since it was called CQ back when Adobe first acquired it. Started in consulting, and now I do a lot of technical marketing. Is maybe a fancy way of saying I write a lot of tutorials and put out a lot of content about the best practices around developing with AEM.
And I seem to recall at the time that your manager went and picked the two best guys from Adobe Consulting, and you're one of them. So, pretty high praise.
Hey, you said it, but thank you. I'll take it.
And Zoran, someone that I interact almost daily with, and I'm always taking pain and problems to. Tell us a bit about yourself, Zoran.
Hello, world. My name is Zoran Nikolovski. I'm a senior solutions consultant with Adobe, focused like Mark on Adobe Experience Manager. So for the past pretty much almost 10 years, I've been building experiences with CQ and then AEM. I've been working in various roles at Adobe, and right now I'm in a role where I spend a lot of time talking to our customers. Bringing some interesting ideas and showcasing the technology to them almost daily, and as part of that, yes, I do spend a lot of time talking to Mike and brainstorming on some pretty cool stuff.
And you still do, so it's appreciated there.
Yeah.
Guys, the topic for today's session is very much around getting started with AEM and. How long's it been? I mean, Zoran, you just mentioned back to the CQ5 days. What version did you start with?
For me, it was CQ 5.4. So for those of you that don't know, that was around the time when the UI of CQ was still blue.
Yep, I do remember the blue version. Danny?
I think probably my first project was 5.4, but I did get thrown on a project very early on that was like a legacy 4.2. where
Wow.
you can't even, it doesn't even resemble anything. Like, I think the trivia, I think there is the password, the admin password. It's not admin, it's super user, super user.
Wow. That's just messing with my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice that they shortened it to admin, right? That's a
It's
few less characters to type in every time.
Absolutely. And for
very
me,
kind.
my first version of CQ was 5.3, but 5.4 was the first version I really played with in Angus. So fair to say that a few things have changed, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an understatement.
yeah. And I think, it'd be good to get your perspective on it. But, as, technologists, we often learn something and then go, right, I've mastered that, and then move on to something else. And I think AEM is something that, is, coming out all the time with new versions, etc. Danny, I know you're working on the weekend tutorial, and I think I'm underselling that. You are the creator and the custodian of the weekend tutorial. Can you tell us a little bit about, what's happening with that?
Yeah, sure thing. So, for those of you who don't know, the weekend tutorial, it's really like a guide for those who want to, start learning AEM, and those who learn best by doing. And so, it really starts from kind of like a ground up. And I think Mark might do some of this on the live stream, but it starts with project setup and kind of tries to simulate what it would be like to work on an actual AEM project before you get on one. And so like a lot of that is inspired because I felt like I didn't learn AEM or CQ at the time until I got thrown on a project. I was super privileged to have actually Justin Edelson. He is the
Yeah.
technical architect on my first project, and he's now gone on to be one of the engineering managers for Cloud Manager. But yeah, that was kind of the goal of it, is really just try and simulate kind of what it would be like to join a project and start working through it. And yeah, so right now it's something, it hasn't been it's a tutorial that gets updated. I try to update it 3 times a year. So the last update was in December. It's definitely due for another update. Most of the updates are just getting on the latest versions of different things, like Mark was mentioning. There's lots of new features that get rolled out with core components and new archetype. Yeah, I think we'll probably touch on some of these as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zoran, I mean, how often do you kickstart a new project?
I mean, look, pretty much almost almost every time that I have to get in front of a customer, it's going to be some sort of a new build. And we have some sort of I guess bootstrap projects that are in fact built on a lot of the weekend work that Danny did. So thank you. That's been hugely helpful for us.
Good.
And I think my work is also around demonstrating some of the more, I guess, niche capabilities of the tool, or use case based capabilities of the tool. So we often extend some of the work that's done in weekend to introduce some ways of automating content, some ways of rapidly building new experiences, and then interfacing with the rest of the Marketing Cloud or Experience Cloud.
And Zoran, you historically have been involved in a lot of tune-ups and helping customers who, as I mentioned before, maybe have implemented AEM and are not kept up to date with the latest ways of doing things. So, is there any kind of core patterns or things that you see that you can call out?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is something that goes back to how AEM used to be, and some of the theme around AEM evolving with version upgrades. But we see a lot of implementations that are quite customized and not just customizing the actual look and feel or the end result, but also customizing the platform itself.
Yep.
And as we know, that's always, there's always a need to sort of tweak and fine tune how things behave. but oftentimes that ends up being a hindrance to upgrading. So we have noticed a few of our customers that are having challenges upgrading because of these customizations.
Cool. So look, I think let's focus in a little bit more, and let's focus on that feature of the day. All right, so what I thought we'd do is to spend a bit of time just understanding exactly what goes into setting up a project to begin with. And, this is something that's really best practice. You should be always thinking about the way that your Adobe project should be looking. And one of the things I really wanted you to see is how quickly we can actually go and build a site and get it live with production ready code. So, guys, I'm going to do like a subset of the weekend tutorial. And just show some of the quick views. And one of the things I want to do here is potentially show it from a front-end developer perspective. So someone who knows nothing about AEM, potentially has no interest in knowing AEM, just wants to get a site up and running, right? So, I'm going to share my screen in a moment here, but, my recommendation, first of all, is even if you've seen the weekend tutorial, go and look at it. What do you reckon, Danny? Every quarter, every couple of months, every day?
Definitely not every day. I would. So the other thing that we try to stay consistent with is the archetype, which I think you'll get into. But we try to keep the tutorial up to date with the archetype. So any new features that come with the archetype or core components are going to flow back into the tutorial. And so if you want to learn what those new features are, you can spin up the tutorial.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's hop in and let's see if the screen sharing works. It looks like it is. So this is the weekend tutorial, by the way. If you haven't seen it, it's a good combination of written guide plus video screenshot tutorials. If you like the sound of Danny's voice, then you'll love this. You'll love this site. But the idea here is that you can walk through and actually understand everything from setting up a project, etc. Now I'm going to short track this and show you the kind of latest and greatest way of starting from scratch. And I'm actually going to start in Experience Cloud and show you where to get AEM. So of course, this assumes that you've got permission, your organization has access. I'm in the Experience Cloud here, and I want to point out this new software distribution link right here in the opening screen. And this is the way that I can come in and get the latest packages. Now, this actually removes historically what we would know as package share, and is the way to get AEM and some of the additional packages for both the Experience Manager 6.5 and service packs, as well as cloud service going forward. Now, there is a couple of questions coming through from some of our live viewers. Ravi's just asked here, is there a way to get a trial version? Absolutely there is. My recommendation right now is to contact someone from Adobe, and we can sort that out and get you access. And of course, if you're a partner organization, you can absolutely get access. But the reason we don't have just a download is because we want to help you out and make sure you're connected with the right resources, so you can actually get up and live. But stay tuned on that. So cloud service. You can see here, because of the nature of the AEM as a cloud service, you'll see new versions of the build show up almost daily. So if you want the latest and greatest AEM, you can come in here, download the quick start, uncompress it, and if you're completely new to AEM, if I go to my desktop for a moment, you'll see I've got a folder here with the quick start and license properties. You double click, and within 30 to 60 seconds, depending on your performance of your machine, looks like mine's struggling a little bit. I think I'm a little jagged there in the display, but you get up and running with AEM. So what you end up with is a blank AEM environment, and the idea behind this is that we're not shipping a production tool full of samples that you're just going to throw away. We give you a nice clean environment you can deploy code to. And as AEM is coming up, you can see in my sites here, I don't have any site. So the question is, how do I get started now that I've got AEM up and running? So Danny mentioned, and in the weekend tutorial, there's talk of something called the AEM Project Archetype. This is, I guess, the Bible or the blessed way to create a project from Adobe. And in the past, there's been lots of different flavors of this. Danny, you would have heard it, lazy bones and things like that. Zoran, is there any you've used in the past?
Lazy Bones was one year,
Yep.
but I think we pretty quickly reverted back to just Archetype.
Yeah, and I think given the amount of improvements, I mean, we're on version 23. Danny, there's been a new version of the Archetype multiple times per year at the moment, right?
Yeah, probably 3 to 4 releases per year. And it's both the Archetype and core components are getting to the point where the amount of contributions from Adobe versus the community, it's almost equal. So a lot of partners are contributing their own, innovations and features back to the Archetype.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will point out that this is on GitHub, so it's not necessarily an Adobe only project. It is something that we absolutely encourage contributions to, but we do it in an open way, so you don't have to go and log in to download something. You can just go and grab it as needed. So let's see what's involved here. I'm not going to go and download the code, etc., but you do need to actually run this somewhere. So I'm going to just go to my terminal. Let's go to iTerm, and there's a slight delay here. There we go. To make it life easier, I've actually, so you don't have to watch me type, I've actually have a shortcut on my desktop that I use quite often that allows me to remember all the various options. And again, this is covered in detail in the weekend tutorial, but I keep this whenever I'm just bootstrapping a project quickly and go and update it with the various settings that I need. So for instance, I've called this We Telco. This is a fictitious telco brand. I'm getting the version 23 of the Archetype. You'll notice a few things here as well, such as the dispatcher configuration, which is recently new to the Archetype, as well as the front end module. And interestingly, for those of you who've been watching the Archetype, we had a spa Archetype. We had this Archetype. Now there's one for commerce. There's a bit of consolidation happening back into one Archetype with then different flavors that you can go and choose. So general obviously being the most generic one, but you can swap that out for other variants as well. And then, do you want to include examples? I'm going to leave that as it is. Guys, any other commentary while I'm running this?
What products does We Telco offer?
They've got this new phone. It's called the Wii phone. It's coming soon.
And is it being rolled out across multiple geos or?
Who, We Telco? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
All right. So I'm just going on my desktop. I'm going to run this, and that should take a couple of minutes at the most, depending on your machine speed. My CPU is clocking in at 90% right now because of all the live streaming, but it should be fine. Let's just let this run. So this is kind of the most complex thing you need to do to get a project up and running is find an example of the batch configuration from the weekend site, update the parameters to suit your needs, run it, and it's going to create a project for you on your desktop. So we'll just minimize.
While it's running, I will say Mark he's using the latest and greatest with the cloud version, but the Archetype is backwards compatible. So if you're on a 6.4, 6.5 project, we still recommend using the latest version of the Archetype, and you'll be able to set the version to one of the on-prem versions of AEM.
Absolutely. And I think one other thing to mention here is, especially if you're a front end developer starting with AEM, AEM is built on top of Java as technology. So to run the archetype, because it's Maven, obviously you'll need Java on your machine.
Good. So it's finished. I'm going to just pop that that directory straight open into Visual Studio Code, which we're going to talk a little bit about later on, why I'm using code. But if my machine wakes up, the fun of live activities, but that's fine. It'll catch up in a moment. The idea is we're bringing this project straight up into a tool that I can use to start building my project. Now, the number one reason I do love code, and it's quite lame, but the fact that you can actually bring up a terminal right here in the tool was a major selling point for me. Because now I've got my code, my editor, my terminal right there. So to get this live, the only extra command you need to run is a Maven clean install. And all right, let's run that. And so now that's going to actually deploy this program into AEM. Now, while that's running, I thought I'd just point out some of the changes, and guys, help me out here as we talk through. If you've seen this in the past, this is now the recommended way from Adobe to build a project. And because of the cloud nature of the way that we're doing deployments, especially with cloud service, but not restricted to that, you'll see additional modules in the project. So an example is, as I said before, the dispatcher is now part of that configuration. So for our AEM cloud service deployments, the dispatcher code gets deployed with the rest of the application code, and that configuration is rolled out. The other one, Danny, do you want to? Can you talk to the app structure or the repository settings, which is available?
Yeah, sure. So one of the big things with AEM as a cloud service is it's really important to have a separation of content and code, mutable content versus application code. So that's why you have the UI apps and the UI content folder modules that are separate. And then the UI apps structure, I gotta be honest, I don't fully understand it. But it's basically a way to let AEM know what you plan on, which path filters you plan on deploying to. And then behind the scenes, it can do some things. It knows what to expect, and it can actually improve on subsequent installs. It can actually be a little bit more efficient and installing new content or new code.
So there's a question coming in while we're doing this around should we be using Java 8 or Java 11? So Danny, Zoran, what's your take on this?
I'm going to say Java 11 as of now.
Yeah. I mean, if you're 6.5 or AEM as cloud service, get on Java 11. It's the way to be.
Yeah. In terms of the cloud services way of doing things, I think it's also very important to note that there's been some significant changes in terms of what you can modify or what you can't when you're building your AEM projects. So Danny touched on it a little bit about the fact that there's things that there's kind of things that are available for you to customize, and they're sort of locked down into that app section or content, obviously, where you create your actual content. But gone are the days when you can jump into something like, say, etc, or even in your libs folder and tweak things to suit what you need. So that's now all moved into under the apps folder where your application code lives, or the conf folder where your configuration resides. So there's things are a lot cleaner and a lot easier to follow, but it also means that there's some parts of the system that are now restricted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the good things and the bad things about AEM is that you can customize anything you want, which means everyone customizes everything. And what we've heard over the years is people come back to Adobe and say, well, look, you guys do this all the time. What is best practice? And so there's definitely been a lot of incentive, and the weekend project is part of that, is to say, we've looked at a lot of projects, we've done a lot of things, we've looked at support calls coming in, we've looked at what our consulting and partners say, and we've brought that back into the Archetype as the best practice. So, splitting up the code, implementing like core components, which we'll talk about in a moment, actually putting them in the Archetype from the get-go, extremely helps me with the ability to go live really quickly. The beauty of live demos is I had a build failure for some reason. I'm running it again. You rehearse these things 3 times or 4 times before you actually go live, and then it happens, but we're live and it's fun, right? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, guys, let's talk about core components while we're waiting for this to build, which takes way less time when you're doing this without live streaming, by the way. This is normally like a 30-second thing at tops. Core components are not something new. They've been around for, how's my memory serving me? At least 3, maybe 4 years.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah,
about 3.
And
6.3.
And we're quite progressed in the versions of them. Actually, let me bring up that site while we're. Come on, laptop. Might be a good time to request a new laptop. What do you reckon, guys?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a component library now. You can see 2.8 of the core components is out, and 2.9, my understanding is it will be out, very, very soon with extra enhancements. But again, this is an open component library. For each of these, the idea is to say that, 80% of your site or more should be just things that are on every site, right? So we all have titles, images, text, some have breadcrumbs, etc. So why reinvent it if it already exists? And because it's open, we're collecting feedback and continually improving these. But one of the biggest benefits is it becomes essentially product code that you don't have to worry about. So when it comes to updating, going to a new version of AEM, it's Adobe's job to make sure that these components work with the update, not a project's job. And therefore you're getting a lot more value, immediately. And, if I go back to the code, and hopefully it's finished deploying, I can't believe it's still going. It actually is, stubbed out in the project here. So when you run the Archetype, you get all of the core components brought into the project. They're not even just sitting there that you've then got to go and configure, which we had to do maybe 12 months ago. You now get the project configured with all the components named the correct way, automatically linked into the project. So when I go and view this live in AEM in hopefully a few seconds, you'll see that I get a site that's ready to go almost immediately.
And Mark, if you want to just expand, maybe the accordion or one of those folders. I think one of the big, I hesitate to call it an innovation, is that a majority of the code that is brought into your project is actually is really just a reference. I think if you click the .content.xml at the root of the accordion folder, you open up that. This is going to have that Sling. I think I'm on line 6, right? That's a Sling resource super type. We could talk probably get real into depth into Sling inheritance, but basically this is just a reference to the actual core component code. So you as your project, as you're maintaining it, you're not maintaining any of the actual code and HTML files and any of the Sling models. You basically just reference it. You make some additional, you add the we telco as the component group, and then you can just start using it out of the box. So I think, and then if you see there's that V1 in the path, so they've actually versioned the core components, which I think is really trying to be very forward thinking. So if you get on a project and you're using this sort of version 1 of the accordion, you want to keep updating maybe other parts to get in some new features of AEM core components, but maybe you're kind of tied to this functionality. You can at least stay on that version, so you can basically have different versions of different components, and nothing's going to prohibit you from always upgrading to the latest and greatest.
Yeah, which is great, and there's more components being added all the time and being updated, which is great. Which we'll see. I'm not going to tease too much about what's coming out in the future, but there's already 20 plus components that are ready for production use. So look, while this is still running, we were going to talk about Visual Studio, so it's probably a good time to talk about that now. Given that a lot of people, I've been using Visual Studio Code for about a year now. Zoran and I both kind of started playing around with it at the same time, and all of a sudden we're thinking, actually, this is really good for everything. What are we seeing? What are you guys using?
You kind of gave my answer away, but yeah, I've been using almost exclusively Visual Studio Code for all my development for the past year plus, and that's across Java, JavaScript, CSS, HTML. So basically my entire stack, one tool.
Yeah, I think maybe, Mark, you were hoping for a rousing debate here, but I'm also on the Visual Studio train. I think I started using it about a year ago, really, when the AEM Spot editor was starting to come out, and we were starting. I wanted something that was better for working with React, and then pretty quickly found out, the Java support is, you install a few extensions, it's pretty good, and then I've actually been leaning more towards front-end work anyways, so I just ended up sticking with it. So it's also my full-time IDE.
Yeah, and on the AEM side as well, there's I know a lot of I know when brackets came out, and it had the AEM sync feature, which was pretty cool at the time, very useful. Well, I think about 3 months or so ago, there was a direct port of the bracket sync available as a Visual Studio Code extension, and yeah, that's pretty much given you the entire all the flexibility that you need for working with AEM.
Yeah. VS Code AEM sync, is that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
that's the one.
It up.
Yeah, this guy here.
Yeah, and there's almost and then I saw that, Mark, you had the other one installed, right? Just the regular AEM sync. So the regular AEM sync was first to market, I guess. It's the first plugin. So I think it's definitely leading on downloads. But I mean, they're both great tools. It's real easy to use.
Yeah. Now that I see the list of extensions, Mark, do you wanna take us through your setup?
Yeah. I have some really lame ones, like an icon theme, which we won't go through, but a lot of the guidance I take from you, mate. So I think one of our favorite ones is the live. Where is it here?
You just passed it, I think.
Yeah, the live share.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen this in action, it's really
I haven't seen that.
So
good.
If you think of like screen sharing to do code reviews, it's kind of hard And Zoran and I used to do this. He'd be like, okay, on line 16, go and change this code. And he'd type something in Slack. I'd copy paste it. I'd put it in. Slack would change the quotation marks to something else. I'd have to fix it. What LiveShare does is effectively you can share your coding with someone else, and they have all their tools, can just type straight into the project, but I can see it in real time. So it's kind of like Google Docs for coding. So instead of contributing or collaborating on a document, you're doing that live on code, which is super useful.
Yeah. And it kind of takes on that whole concept of peer programming and just actually implements it in the tool. So especially for these times when we're not physically able to be in the same location at the same time, something like LiveShare is just invaluable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I did not know about that one. I have to download it now.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. And it just brings up a panel on the side. You can have people that you collaborate with all the time. What else do I use? I do a bit of work with Azure Functions, etc. So that's why you can see those in here. And again, a fairly simplistic one, but pair colorization for me is just a get out of jail card when you're trying to go through code and go work out where that bracket closes. It's a kind of cool one to have. I know.
Yeah.
But I find it useful. Zoran, how about you?
What else do I use? It's an excellent question. Let me have a peek. There's one that I've been playing with recently, especially because we're starting to have a lot of conversations with customers that have really mature front end development teams and they're starting to look into things like AEM, and so to speed their sort of development lifecycle up, there's an extension for Visual Studio Code called AEM Component Builder. Which is sort of useful to kind of get you started on it quick. So it sort of builds up a skeleton of a component, including dialogues and the likes, which I find really quite useful.
Fantastic. Guess what, guys? It completed. I kid you not.
What's the build time on that? 12 minutes?
Record a video and post it on how long it normally takes. But let's go into AEM now and hopefully see how this works. My CPU is really struggling, so it could be just a result of that. But if we rewind the conversation, the idea is that I download AEM and I run that. I run the archetype and it builds me a framework for a project. I then deploy that and I get a production-ready site as a skeleton that I can then go and use and extend. So when this actually renders, you'll see a page with all the components listed out that I can start to drag and drop. And then the next question obviously is, well, that doesn't look like anything how I'd want to use it in production. How do I get the right components, the right style, the right design, and so on? So I'm going to show you that if my browser actually behaves. All right, so let's go in here. Let's click edit. And we should see this.
And I am noticing that WeTelco is set up to be multilingual, so
it is. Well,
that internationalization.
Well, I mean, I'm in APAC, so I'm used to dealing with different languages and different cultures. So we always make sure that we have, the different language support. And I remind people that AEM was actually built in Switzerland, where they have 3 languages by default. So AEM has always supported multiple languages. You can see immediately, like the WeTelco path is in there. I've got the master. It's actually set up live copy and blueprinting for me, so I can immediately go and do a language copy, run the translation workflows. I can do the multi-site management if I've got, an Australian site and a Singaporean site, etc. I can have a copy, make some modifications, and so on. This CPU is killing me. It really is killing me.
I think it's the fancy camera that you've got, right? Like that,
Yeah.
it's too strong. You gotta go back to the the little Mac, little tiny thing that Zoran and I are using.
Could be. It
Yeah.
costs a lot of money to make me look good, so and it's struggling. So
You're almost there.
We're almost there. So we'll be a little patient. While we're waiting for this, there was a question that came in about extending core components. So maybe we address that now. If we need to extend or modify core components, where do we make the customization?
Yeah. I can start. If you're UI apps is definitely the right spot if you need to modify the actual sightly render of the component or extend the dialogue and the likes. If you need to add things to the Sling model as well, then you'll need to appropriately handle for that in the core bundle of your project as well, or wherever you're managing the core components bundle.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as being able to extend them, like there's no problem with extending core components, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
There's patterns that are well defined and described in the actual wiki of the repo, especially around extending the Sling models as well. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I look at it almost like there's 3 levels of extension that you can, of course, style the core components, and there, I think that's the most minimal one that you can do, and you can add a bunch of different styles using the style system, so you can have different flavors of a teaser component. And then the next level, like Zoran was saying, is extending the HTML script, where you're adding additional markup or you're extending the dialogue. So that's in UI apps. And then kind of the last one, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not as big of a Java guy. That one seems to be the most daunting, is actually going in and creating a Sling model. And there's a delegation pattern that's listed in the core component wiki, and it's actually pretty easy, and it's nice because it's really like an extension. You don't have to rewrite the logic for the image component. You can just add an additional method, and it's like, okay, now I get a new field. I get a little bit extra data here that I can work with.
Zoran,
Absolutely.
You've done a bit of work with components and extending them. You were the first one to introduce me to Sling models, so your views?
Yeah, it's look, I agree. I mean, we've had quite a few of these discussions with customers lately around sort of how to use core components the right way, and oftentimes there's a bit of a confusion as to whether customers need to strictly adhere to things that are being provided by the core components library, especially the HTML scripts. And I mean, to me, it's like absolutely they're there to be your starting point, or your Northern Star. Where you take them, and like Mark said, they're there to cater for 80% of your, or roughly around 80% of what your website is going to be. How they achieve that, whether you just use them out of the box, whether you extend the HTML, you completely rewrite it, whether you extend the Sling model, that's all up to you. They're flexible enough to support all those use cases.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I'll add was I kind of, like where's getting even further, like where do you draw the line between just extending, like say like the breadcrumb, or maybe extending just the teaser component and then introducing your own component that's kind of based on the teaser component. And I don't know if Zoran, if you agree, but I kind of think if you introduce a new authoring dialogue or a new piece of data, then go ahead and introduce a new component. It's still going to inherit from the core teaser or whatever, but like now maybe it's like a card component or something because it's got this extra piece. Is that kind of where your head's at as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, and this might be a bit of a philosophical answer, but I always look at them. I always look at the core components as almost data models, right? So if the data model of the core component fits your need, then don't go further. If you need some other specific fields that your data model needs to provide, then absolutely, yeah. Find the nearest core component, extend it, and carry on.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, by the way, I feel like the audio is cracking up a little bit, but we'll push through. It could be my CPU, it could be Zoran's internet, it could be Zoran himself. But look, I'm conscious of time. I'm going to record a video of this demo and post it to the same channel so you can watch that. But the key things I wanted to point out is what took more than 25 minutes normally takes like 4 minutes. Right, it's run AEM, run the archetype. You get to this point, you have a fully running site, and then you can start to style it using Visual Studio Code or your tool of choice. So the one thing I will point out while we're back here in Visual Studio Code is this new UI front end directory, and this is, I think, one of the things that it's almost an aha moment for people who have looked at AEM in the past and started being bogged down with client libs and understanding how they're mapped. And you try and talk to someone who doesn't understand AEM, and they're like, "Sorry, what's a client lib? And how do I get that into my project? And what do you mean it needs to be this way?" If you look at the front end library, you'll see some familiar terms here, such as the use of Webpack. And again, all of the components that we can see are actually created here with a starting point for use of pre-compiling, and it has the class names already spelled out for you. So you don't have to go and think about, all right, how do I get my styles into AEM? You can just go in there and it's already telling you this is exactly where your front end code should be, your front end markup, and then through the build process, this all gets picked up, compiled, pushed to AEM for deployment. But what it also allows you to do is very quickly do front end testing and styling without running AEM. And what I mean by that is if I actually go into the directory here, so UI front end, and if I just show the contents of that, you'll see that we've got some node configuration here. So I can run Webpack and I can run a local deployment really easy. So let me just do that without screwing it up. So we'll run that, and what it's going to do, and again, we'll see how my CPU on my laptop runs, but it will deploy a local version of the site just in Node, so I can then start to test it, and I can make CSS changes and immediately see them in my browser. If I'm picking up, for instance, the grid system or imagery, etc., that can come from an AEM environment. It doesn't have to be local. It could be a remote server. So it means your front-end guys can actually build some content and do all the styling and then check it into the project, as opposed to trying to understand everything about AEM. Of course, in a beautiful world, we'd all sit down and go through the weekend tutorial. You can do that this weekend. But if you're working with someone who doesn't really want to know AEM, they just want to know the basics of how to get my style and front-end code in, then this is the right channel for that. So you can see here I have the site running on localhost 8080, which I can then go and style. And as I mentioned, I will add a link to a recording that I'll post today of that entire demo, so you can watch that when I don't have streaming bandwidth issues for my CPU. All right, I think we've got enough on that topic for now, but I do want to spend the last few minutes on some things that are happening in the community. So let's see what's happening there. So the idea behind the community section is that there's so much happening that we want to be able to share, whether it's tweets of cool projects or open source projects that are live. There's so many things that we want to share, every time that I run a live stream. And again, I'm asking for volunteers. So if you want to share a project, if you want to come and actually join the show and actually share some of the cool stuff you're doing, then hit me up, let me know, and we'll set that up. But I'm going to get back to the screen share, guys, and let's walk through a few items. So first of all, Experience League, Danny.
Yeah, so right now, a lot of the content and tutorials that my team and myself create is on docs.adobe.com. And there's a lot of great enablement efforts that are being done at Adobe, not just with AEM, but with Campaign, all of the Experience Cloud solutions, Target, Analytics. And what's going to happen over, probably it's going to be a few months, but there's already some content out there where it's almost like these guided courses that you can find on Experience League under Learn, and you fill out like four questions, I think it is, like what solutions you're interested in, what level you think you are, what sort of role you would have, whether you're a developer, business analyst, and it'll just start recommending some of these courses for you, and you can of course browse all of them yourself, but it's really this sort of guided learning. I think with AEM and probably a lot of our solutions, they are incredibly powerful, and because they're so powerful, they're so big, and because they're so big, it's sometimes difficult to know where to start. And so this is what I would say is going to be, the place for you to just start your learning, whether you're just want a refresher or any sort of, you want to pick up a new solution through the Experience Cloud. This is going to be the place for you.
Absolutely, totally agree. Let's keep rolling. AEM Storybook. This is something that we've both come across recently. And it extends kind of what I was showing before. But Danny, have you spent much time with this project?
Yeah, I've spent a little bit of time. If any of those the core contributors are listening, they're probably saying not enough. But for those of you who don't know, Storybook is this great UI front end tool that's really popular for front end development, where the idea is that you isolate your UI front end into different components. And because AEM already sort of has this notion of components, the fit is actually really nicely, and so there is a very rudimentary integration with Storybook that's currently out there on the weekend tutorial on the reference side. But this is what I would say is like a next generation where you're going to be able to actually start managing your HTML code within your Storybook, and you're not just working with static markup. So the developers and the contributors of this have put a lot of thought and effort into it. I'm excited to see where it goes, and it goes back to the sort of the UI front end module, where just trying to make it easier for front end developers to get involved in AEM development.
Awesome. Next one is AMP and core components.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about this. AMP is actually by Google, accelerated mobile pages. I think basically if you're on a mobile phone and you are searching for a news story, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an AMP page that shows up. And so Bounteous has been working with AEM Engineering, and they're going to basically introduce AMP compatible renditions of core components. And AMP has a very strict markup, but basically once this is merged into the core component library, you'll basically be getting an AMP version of your page for free. As long as you're on the version of Core Components that has this feature, you basically change a selector, and your page will just start rendering in AMP. And the only thing you'll have to do is just make sure it's styled correctly.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry, I was going to say before we move on, I know there's quite a few customers that are in the region that have been asking for this capability. So it is incredibly exciting that it's coming out.
Yeah, and I think this is a good example of open source community, our partner community, working with Adobe to pick up things that may be coming up in projects and actually saying, well, other people can benefit from this. And hopefully we see more of this in the community where people are saying, okay, well, I'm getting something from the community, so I'll contribute back to the community. And there's actually a project, a playpen for actually checking in contributions. And I'll put all these links in the show notes so you can actually click through and look at them. But if you're daunted by cloning a repository and doing a pull request, etc., you can at least go and grab this and contribute code and actually ask for for feedback on that. So it's good. In the interest of time, I'm going to go on to the next one. Zoran, the AEM component generator.
Yeah. So this one, and this is completely by accident, but it's also something that was originally contributed by Bounteous. So it is an AEM component generator project where basically you specify your configuration or you specify a bunch of properties that define your component. You run a jar command, and your entire component gets generated automatically. And basically, if you're a front end developer that doesn't really care for all the Java backend and all the and building out Java classes by yourself, this is a great way to rapidly produce components that you need to get your websites done.
Yeah, good. So definitely worth checking out. The last one I want to call out, and we'll come back and we'll do a session on this, is a new project from Adobe. We've talked about it for a few months now. It's the Adobe Client Data Layer. And without manually going through and marking up every single item that you want to track through analytics, Adobe's working on a project together with our analytics team and our Adobe launch team is to streamline the way that works. So the reason I'm bringing it up now is because it's open, we're really open for feedback. So go and have a look at it. Make comments on the page, or hit me up and I can introduce you. And like I said, we'll do a session in future on AEM with Adobe Launch, Analytics, and the data layer. We can see how that all fits together. All right. I feel like it's time. It's kind of the end of the show. We're right on time for where we are as far as the allotted time. But Zoran, Danny, I want to thank you for being the first guest on the show. It's been really useful, valued contribution. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Mike, for organizing.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And really kudos to the production quality. Incredible. It's awesome, man.
Oh, hey, we're Adobe. This is the things we do. So, so it's good. And look, I think just to wrap it up, as far as what to see in future, I'm going to try and do this weekly. We'll see how we go. It's going to really depend on who I can get and to donate their time. I do have a session lined up within the next week for a focus on Adobe XD and how Adobe XD can work with AEM and some of the tool chaining that we're working on there. I'm hoping to get one of the product managers involved in the conversation. So stay tuned for that one. I'll put it on the website, the time and date, or just subscribe to the channel. Now I'm a real YouTuber. Hit the subscribe button.
Yeah, you have to point to like a corner. I think that's a key part of the YouTuber.
Yeah,
there.
But of course, I'm going to I'll blog all of the links and everything that I shared today with the recording, etc., and the extra demo recording that I'll do today as well, so everyone can put it. And last of all, I'm really keen to get everyone's feedback. This show is really about the benefit that it brings everyone who watches it. I mean, Danny, Zoran, and I can just chat all day, but if it adds value to you, even better. So, I'm going to put in a survey that I'd love some input on. Tell us, show length, time of day, technical topics, technical depth. What would you like to see? Would you like to be on the show? These are all the things that would be really good to watch. So, Danny and Zoran, thank you very much. This is it for the show from me, and I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.